She should have known her place, the officer muttered before slapping her so hard it echoed across the courtroom. In front of cameras, in front of a stunned judge, in front of a crowd that couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed, the woman, calm, composed, and holding a secret that would bring his entire career crashing down. This wasn't just an assault, it was a symbol of everything broken in a system that protects the powerful and punishes the innocent. If this infuriates you, you're not alone. Drop a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe now so you never miss the truth when it hits this hard. The Georgia sun was already beating down hard at 8:47 a.m. when people began filing into courtroom 3B of the Fulton County Courthouse. The building itself, a massive blend of steel and sandstone, stood like a monument to justice. But today it felt like the stage for something far more volatile. Inside, the air conditioning worked overtime, humming softly as the crowd settled. Murmurs filled the wooden chamber, attorneys whispering strategy, a couple of local reporters typing on tablets, and a few curious civilians who had shown up for the drama of it all. Everyone knew something was brewing, they just didn't know what. At the center of it all stood Officer Richard Mitchell, 6'2" with a military buzz cut and sharp, pale blue eyes. Mitchell looked every bit the seasoned cop he claimed to be. His uniform was immaculate, the buttons polished, his badge catching the light just right as he crossed his arms and scanned the room with casual dominance. This courtroom had always felt like familiar ground to him. He wasn't just a witness in today's hearing. He was the enforcer, the authority, the man who had arrested the defendant in question. And that defendant? That's where the picture got complicated. Across the aisle stood a woman, a black woman in her late 30s, composed in a tailored navy blue suit. She wore minimal makeup, her natural hair pulled back into a tight bun, and a simple silver necklace glinting softly beneath the collar of her blouse. She stood near the defense table, arms calmly at her sides, eyes scanning the room as if she were taking mental notes on everyone present. Mitchell's lip curled. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, not quietly. He leaned slightly toward a young prosecutor seated beside him. "She's the one making this into a civil rights case." Another activist looking for attention. "Unbelievable." The prosecutor didn't respond. She just looked away. Mitchell's voice was louder now, and his comments began to carry to the rows behind them. "These people always play the race card when they get caught," he said, shaking his head. "God forbid anyone actually hold them accountable." The murmurs in the courtroom began to die down as people started tuning in to the confrontation unfolding before them. The woman said nothing, didn't even glance in Mitchell's direction. That enraged him. He stepped closer to her, the space between them shrinking. His boot struck the floor hard, deliberately. He towered over her, hands on his belt, voice rising. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he barked. "You got something to say? Or are you just going to act like you're better than the law?" Still, she said nothing. Mitchell's face turned red, a vein pulsing at his temple. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by someone like her, someone he thought should feel intimidated. He reached out, pointing a finger at her face, nearly making contact. "That's the problem with you people," he said, voice thick with contempt. "You walk around like you're owed something, like you're above the rules." The woman blinked once, slowly. "Officer Mitchell," she said evenly, her voice calm and controlled. "You're dangerously close to contempt of court." Mitchell laughed. A short, ugly sound. "Contempt," he sneered. "Lady, the only contempt I got is for people like you who think they can waltz into this system and flip it upside down." Then it happened. Without warning, Mitchell's open hand shot forward, and he slapped her across the face. A sharp, echoing crack rang out through the courtroom. It was the kind of sound that made your stomach drop. People gasped. A woman screamed. The judge dropped his gavel in stunned silence, before pounding it against the bench with force. "Order! Order in this court!" the judge shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. The room exploded into chaos. Lawyers jumped to their feet. Someone called for security. Cameras clicked as the courtroom bailiff rushed forward. Mitchell, chest heaving, looked smug, victorious. He sneered again. "That ought to teach you respect." But the woman didn't fall. She barely moved. Her head had turned with the blow, but now she turned back, slowly, her eyes locking on his. There was no fear in them, only fire. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career," she said, her voice low but cutting like steel. Mitchell blinked. The smirk twitched. For the first time all morning, Doubt crept into his expression. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice softer now. From the back of the courtroom, a door opened. Several high-ranking police officials entered, including the city's public safety director and deputy chief. All eyes turned. The woman turned too calmly, purposefully, and walked to the front of the courtroom where the judge was seated. The judge, a tall, elderly black man with a white beard, rose to his feet. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried authority. "Court will take a recess," he announced. "Everyone remain in place." The judge nodded toward the woman. "You may proceed, Chief Carter." Mitchell's heart stopped. Chief Carter. He stared at her, mouth suddenly dry. The woman he had just slapped, the one he'd mocked, humiliated, called "you people," was not the defendant. She was the newly appointed chief of police for the Atlanta Police Department. Mitchell took a step back, instinctively reaching for the badge on his chest, as if it might protect him. But in that moment, it meant nothing. His face drained of color. The crowd began to murmur again, this time not with gossip, but with a wave of disbelief, shock, and something worse for Mitchell. Recognition of his downfall, and it was only just beginning. Back in the precinct, the fallout was immediate. The slap, the one Mitchell had delivered with all the arrogance and impunity of a man convinced of his own untouchability, was already making waves. The footage, caught by one of the courtroom's internal security cameras, had been sent directly to the chief's office and the Internal Affairs Division before the recess had even ended. Within 30 minutes, Mitchell's name was on a formal use of force complaint, flagged for emergency disciplinary review. But Mitchell didn't know that yet. He stormed into the precinct like he owned the place. Jaw tight, bootsteps loud, eyes daring anyone to challenge him. He passed by fellow officers, some of whom gave him blank stares, others uneasy nods. A few refused to look at him at all. "What's everyone looking so tense for?" he snapped, glaring at a rookie officer who quickly turned back to his monitor. Mitchell barged into his office, dropped heavily into his chair, and slammed his fists onto the desk. "That woman," he muttered, seething. "She thinks she can play games with me." A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Officer Tim Reynolds, his longtime partner and one of the few people left in the building who still looked up to him. "You see what happened in court?" Mitchell asked, not waiting for an answer. "Unreal. I put her in her place, and now the whole damn room's acting like I shot the Pope." Reynolds hesitated in the doorway. "They're saying she's Chief Carter." Mitchell laughed bitterly. "Yeah, so what? She just got the title. That doesn't mean she gets to walk around acting like she's better than the rest of us. She's not some saint." Reynolds didn't reply. Instead, he handed Mitchell a manila envelope. "This came from Internal Affairs. They asked me to deliver it straight to you." Mitchell took it with a scoff, ripped it open, and scanned the top of the letter, then stopped. His eyes narrowed. "Temporary suspension pending investigation," he read out loud, voice suddenly hollow. "Effective immediately." He read it again, slower. "His badge, his weapon. He was to surrender them by 5. "This is bull," he barked, slamming the envelope onto his desk. "They're treating this like I assaulted a civilian. I didn't know who she was." Reynolds said nothing. He simply turned and walked away, the door closing softly behind him. Mitchell stared down at the letter, heart racing. His hand instinctively went to his holster, his thumb brushing the leather strap. It was still there for now, but the letter had stripped it of meaning. It wasn't about the badge anymore. It was about accountability. Meanwhile, Chief Carter sat calmly in her office across town. Her eyes were fixed on the screen in front of her. She had watched the footage at least 5 times, not because she needed confirmation, but because she needed to remind herself what was at stake. This wasn't about one slap. It was about every moment that had led to it. Every microaggression, every abuse of authority, every time someone like Mitchell was allowed to walk free after crossing the line. There had to be a reckoning. Her phone buzzed. It was Captain Eliza Davis, head of Internal Affairs. "We've pulled his file," she said immediately. "It's worse than we thought. Use of force complaints going back 10 years. Most never went anywhere, buried, dismissed, or just conveniently lost." Chief Carter exhaled slowly. "And now, we're reopening them, all of them. We've got whistleblowers already reaching out, former officers, even a couple of civilians who filed the original complaints." "Good," Carter said. "Let's make this thorough." Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. This wasn't revenge. This was a long overdue course correction. Back at the precinct, Mitchell's fall from grace accelerated. First came the whispers, then the stares. Officers who once toasted him at bars now avoided eye contact. His name, once spoken with reverence, became a warning. Even the walls of his own office seemed to mock him now. Commendations and plaques that used to symbolize pride now felt like lies hanging in shame. And then came the moment that shattered what little pride he had left. The chief arrived. Chief Naomi Carter walked into the precinct like a storm in heels. No flash, no theatrics, just a quiet confidence that made the floor feel like it shifted beneath her. She stepped into Mitchell's office without knocking. "Richard," she said. He looked up, startled. For the first time, he didn't have something snide or smug to say. "You need to turn in your badge," she said simply. "Now." Mitchell stood, defensive. "You think this is justice?" "No," Carter replied. "Justice would have been you never getting the power to do what you did. This is just the beginning." "You're out for blood," he growled. "I'm out for change," she corrected. "You just happened to be the first domino to fall." Mitchell's fists clenched. "You can't come in here and tear everything down." "Watch me," she said. By 5 p.m., his badge was on her desk, alongside his gun, his ID, and the last shreds of his authority. The chief didn't gloat. She didn't even smile. She just picked up the phone and said, "Send in the next one." Because Mitchell was never the only problem. He was just the first to fall. Under the pale glow of the precinct's hallway lights, Officer Raymond Carter walked with a calm that didn't match the chaos unraveling behind him. Every step echoed like a verdict, heavy with the knowledge of what he had just witnessed and what he now had to act on. In his hand, he carried a single flash drive, small and unassuming, yet packed with the raw, unedited truth, the video footage that showed exactly what happened in the courtroom. There was no denying it anymore. The slap, the sneer, the abuse of power, all caught in brutal, undeniable clarity. As he turned the corner into the Internal Affairs Division, his pulse quickened. The door loomed ahead, marked restricted access. But for the first time in his career, Carter didn't hesitate. He had been silent long enough, maybe too long, but seeing a black woman, the new chief no less, assaulted in full view of a courtroom, had lit a fire in him he didn't even know was there. Inside, Lieutenant Amanda Vargas looked up from her desk, startled. "Carter," she said, confused. "What are you doing here?" Without speaking, Carter placed the flash drive on her desk and took a deep breath. "You'll want to see this," he said. "It's about Mitchell." Vargas narrowed her eyes, but plugged the drive in without another word. As the footage played, her face transformed. Confusion gave way to disbelief, then rage. By the time the video ended, her jaw was clenched tight. This isn't just a policy violation," she said, voice low. "It's criminal." Carter nodded. He thought no one would say anything. He was wrong. Within an hour, Mitchell was being called into the chief's office. He strutted through the hallway like he always had, his smirk intact, his badge gleaming, unaware that this time it would be his last walk as a free man in uniform. Inside, Chief Naomi Prescott sat behind her desk, stone-faced. The walls around her were decorated with plaques, commendations, and framed photos of a force she was trying to fix from the inside out. "Officer Mitchell," she said as he entered, gesturing for him to sit. Mitchell took the seat, leaning back with that same arrogant tilt. "You wanted to see me?" Naomi didn't reply immediately. She reached into her drawer, pulled out a manila folder, and slid it across the desk to him. "That's your disciplinary report. And the charges." Mitchell didn't open it. "Charges?" he scoffed. "This is a joke, right?" Naomi's eyes didn't flinch. "Assault, abuse of power, obstruction of justice. Oh, and tampering with evidence. You covered your tracks, Mitchell. Just not well enough." His smirk faltered. "You think you can just throw my career away? You think that courtroom footage is enough to—" Naomi cut him off with a single sentence. "You slapped your commanding officer in a packed courtroom." The words hung in the air like a hammer. Mitchell opened his mouth, then closed it again. He knew the footage existed now. Someone had turned. But who? "You're out for blood," he growled, the heat in his voice rising. "I'm out for change," she corrected. "You just happened to be the first domino to fall." Mitchell's fists clenched on the armrests. "You can't come in here and tear everything down." Naomi stood, her presence radiating authority. "Watch me." By 5:00 p.m., his badge was on her desk, alongside his gun, his ID, and the last shreds of his authority. The chief didn't gloat. She didn't even smile. She just picked up the phone and said, "Send in the next one." Word spread fast. Within days, Internal Affairs opened a full-scale investigation. Officers who had once backed Mitchell now avoided eye contact in the hallways. Files were being pulled, complaints re-examined. The precinct had become a pressure cooker, and Naomi was at the center of it, dismantling years of unchecked abuse brick by brick. But Mitchell wasn't done. A week later, he stood outside the courthouse, flanked by his attorney, denying everything. "This is political," he told reporters. "She's trying to make a name for herself by destroying good cops." But no one was buying it. Not anymore. Not after Officer Carter publicly confirmed the footage. Not after several junior officers came forward, each with their own stories of intimidation, racial profiling, and quiet cover-ups, orchestrated or condoned by Mitchell. Inside her office, Naomi sat with Captain Leonard King, reviewing the growing stack of sworn statements. King, a grizzled veteran of 3 decades, leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "Hell of a mess you've walked into," he said. Naomi didn't blink. "I didn't walk into it. I walked through it," King chuckled, despite himself. "You really gonna burn it all down?" "I'm gonna rebuild it," she said, "but first we take out the rot." He nodded, tapping a pen against the desk. "You've got support, you know, not just from us, from the community. People are watching." She looked out the window at the city, its mix of concrete, glass, and broken promises. "Good," she said. "Let them see what justice looks like." The trial date was set. The prosecution wasted no time assembling a case. Video evidence, witness testimony, a paper trail Mitchell had never expected to surface. It all came crashing down in the courtroom where he once strutted with impunity. This time, he sat on the other side of the room. His lawyer whispered frantically into his ear. Across the aisle, Naomi sat silently. She didn't look at him, not once, but he looked at her, and for the first time in his life, Mitchell felt small. Not because of her title, not because of the badge she wore or the power she wielded, but because of what she represented, the thing he had spent his career trying to bury: accountability. When the verdict came, the room was silent. Guilty. Mitchell's head dropped. The courtroom doors opened behind him, and the officers who had once called him brother now walked him out in cuffs. Outside, a crowd waited. Some cheered, some cried, and somewhere in the back, a little black girl clutched her mother's hand and asked, "Is that the man who hurt the chief?" Her mother nodded. The girl frowned, then smiled. "He doesn't look so scary anymore." In a world where silence often protects injustice, this story reminds us that speaking up, no matter how small the voice, can spark real change. It's not just about one courtroom or one badge. It's about standing against the everyday abuse of power, wherever it hides. If this moved you the way it moved us, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe to our channel. We're building a community that believes in truth, justice, and stories that actually mean something. Join us.